John, how do you think this would have been looked at if it was a UFC event instead of the Bellator event that it was?
Um, it's not, to say it's different. Conor had a situation with, when Artem Lobov was fighting Fili in Poland, and he's moving around trying to coach, and Mark Goddard stops the fight and says, put him back to his seat or take him out of here. And Mark is doing that because that's what's fair.
Mm-hmm.
The job of the referee is to do things that keep the playing field as level as possible. And when you have an extra coach who's moving around coaching a fighter during the fight, that's not fair, because you got Fili's corner who can't do that. They're put in their place. They can coach from their thing, but if the fight's far away, they don't have the ability to get up and move around, and so it's not fair for Artem to have the same, have that when Fili doesn't. So, Mark had done something, previously, but, did the UFC do anything about it? No. And do I think, they were going to do anything about this? I can't say. I really don't know. They're saying that they're taking him off of, UFC 219 if he was going to fight, and if that's their decision to do it. They're the promoter that has a contract with him. The real difference is when you look at Conor is not a licensed fighter by the Mohegan tribe. He
Sure.
was not a Bellator fighter. He's not licensed at that show or anything like that. He wasn't licensed as a cornerman, as a trainer, as a fighter. So for you to actually do something in a regulatory fashion as far as suspensions or fines, you really don't have a whole lot that you can go on, because you've got to actually treat him like you were saying, the average fan, and what would be done to the average fan.
Big John McCarthy on MMA Tonight. All right, let's move on from Conor. Just curious about your opinion on MMA judging in general. So often we hear fans, MMA judging's terrible, it sucks, it's the worst. In general, how would you grade MMA judging in 2017?
It's getting much better. Look at, people can complain, but I talk to people all the time, and they say, well, he was in control. And it's like, okay, that's great. I'm glad you say that, because control is the last element that the judge will consider. And he's got to say that the striking and grappling were completely even, and that the aggressiveness was completely even, to move himself down into ring or cage control, because we took that away because we didn't want people stalling fights, getting a position, being on top, and stalling and letting the clock click by, so we had a boring fight. The whole point of the fight is, we want the fighters to go out, have an even platform to fight on, show their best, but they're getting paid to entertain, and they have to entertain. They can't sit there and stall a fight. So many fans do not have any concept of what the actual criteria is for an MMA judge to judge a fight, and who they're going to give it to based upon what.
You're going to get the questions that I'm sure you knew were going to be coming next. You said before the fight, I'm thinking about retiring, and then you kind of jump back and forth. And then you said afterwards, well, I'm going to talk to my friends and family first, and see where I go from now. Now that you've had 3 days or so to digest it, where do you see your career going next?
Well, I haven't really had 3 days to digest it, I guess, because first thing we did was we went to Washington, D.C. with my kids, and we went up there and we spent a couple of days exploring Washington, D.C., especially for Veterans Day. I have a lot of family that were veterans, so that was cool, and we didn't really get a chance to even think about it. And to be honest, I haven't really thought about it and don't really plan on thinking about it anytime too soon. I really want to let it it's got to just be right, you know what I mean? It's just got to be something that it either feels one way or feels the other way. It can't be about halfway in or halfway out.
So when you do eventually sit down and decide what you're going to do next with your career, what are the factors that play into that? Is it just how you feel about it? Is it what your wife wants you to do? Is it what your coach is like? What are the pluses and minuses and the factors going to make the decision of what you do next?
There's really just going to be one thing, and it's whether I'm willing to sacrifice what it takes to be at the top. Like I have the hunger to fight. I have the hunger to go in there and do a training camp. That's one thing, but I don't want to be a half-ass fighter. If I'm not doing it for a championship, then I just don't want to be doing it. And I have to decide if me and my family are willing to put in the sacrifice, the work, the dedication necessary to be a champion. And because I know that I have the physical tools, I know I have the mental tools, I know I have the ability, I have the skills, all those things are in place. But if I don't dedicate everything I have to it and make some certain sacrifices and be willing to do what others aren't willing to do, then I'm not going to get what others don't get. So, and that's going to require the equal dedication from my family and, so it's just going to be, whether we're just going to have to commit to it or not. And part of that commitment is going to require, that means I'm sacrificing time for my kids. And it just means that there's a lot of, things that go into that. So it'll be I don't think it'll be a, sit down in 1 hour, bang it out conversation. It's something I really have to think about and decide first if I have the motivation to do that, because I feel like when I'm, I've lost these fights in the past, and I can look back and I can just see, I just didn't have the motivation, or I just wasn't training to my fullest extent, and that gets exposed when you're fighting these top 10 guys. I mean, so there's no reason to risk my health like that if I'm not going to put everything I have into it.
Matt, so let's say after this interview later tonight, in an hour from now, Dana White gives you a call and says, hey, what's the plan? Like, what are we going to do? I want you to fight again. I want you to fight in, say, 6 months. Like, what would you tell him?
Well, fortunately, I'm at the point in my career where me and Dana are pretty cool like that, and I know that conversation is not going to happen. But let's say hypothetically it did. I'd say, put me in, Dana. Let's go. I'm not going to never back down from a challenge, and that's the big thing. That's why I've already talked to him. I said, look, let me just have my time, and they're totally cool with that. I've put in my time in the UFC. I got rapport. I know the guys real well. It's not going to be a pressure thing for me. Of course, if anybody pressures me to fight, I'm going to step in and fight right away. It doesn't even honestly take a whole lot of pressure. So I tell them, look, please don't pressure me. Let me make the right decision and not be about anything other than, what's right.
MMA Tonight, Tuesdays through Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, only on your home for mixed martial arts, Sirius XM Rush Channel 93, and on your phone with the Sirius XM app.